Welcome to the Anxious Child Podcast, Episode 4.
Welcome to the Anxious Child Podcast, the podcast that helps you best work with anxious kids and teens. Now, here's your host, Stephen Quinlan.
Today on the show, I'm really excited that we have an art therapist to tell us about ways in which she works with children. I'm happy to welcome Corry MacDonald, who is a creative healer with over 20 years of cross-cultural living in 5 countries. She helps people activate their creative intelligence, transforming challenges into wisdom and information through her signature creative method for accessing infinite potentials and inner joy. Corry is just a joy to talk to, and I think you'll see how that comes through in the work that she does. She has a unique gift to help people get out of their heads and more into their emotional centers, and then create things out of that. It's really great to connect with her and have her wisdom here on the podcast. I think there's a lot to learn for working with kids, obviously, but also with teenagers and adults somewhat, and helping us all to free ourselves from those binds that sometimes keep us from accessing wisdom that might be right there in front of us. I think we can all agree that we don't need anything that adds any extra anxiety in our already hectic lifestyles. You know, something that causes anxiety is clutter, especially cord clutter. Mount Genie at mountgenie.com makes clever tech accessories and mounting solutions for your Alexa, Google Home, video game consoles, and all brands of Wi-Fi mesh router networks. They rein in that messy cord clutter in your home or in your office. Mount Genie also has organizational solutions for your keys, remotes, sunglasses, and more. Most install without tools in minutes and won't cause damage to walls. Mount Genie is a family-owned company solving your cord clutter problems. Check them out today at mountgenie.com. So, let's break out those crayons and paintbrushes and get ready for me and Corry MacDonald. Enjoy. All right, welcome, Corry. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks, Stephen.
I really appreciate you being here and being my first international guest all the way on the other
Yeah.
side of the globe in Belgium.
I know. In Belgium, and my accent sounds very Canadian, so you really got it. You got the double whammy.
That's great. Well, tell me, how long have you been over there?
Yeah, we've only been in Belgium since October, but we've been living this nomadic overseas life for almost 25 years
Oh,
now.
wow.
Yeah.
Where are
And
some of the other places that you've lived in?
we started in Asia. So my husband and I thought we'll go to Japan for a year, and then we never came home. And
Wow.
we ended up spending maybe about 7 years there. And then we tried to come home with our first child
Uh,
and really missed overseas life, and then popped over to Singapore, back to Japan, then Thailand. Then we left Asia and we were in the Middle East, in Dubai for a little while. And then now we're in the EU here in plop in the middle in Belgium.
wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a journey. I'd love to start also with just kind of your journey towards the work that you're doing now, and how you got involved in that in the first place.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that we started talking about all this popping around the world,
Yeah.
because that the two are entwined actually. When I was growing up in Canada, I never imagined I would live this sort of, I call it like I'm a butterfly popping around. And my work as a creative healer, a lot of what I do, I integrate healing modalities that I learned along the way at all those different stops.
Hmm.
And it just happened that way. I didn't plan this, as happens in life. But I grew up in a family where we didn't know how to handle heavy trapped emotions, as most families didn't have this, no, we weren't talking about these things like healing and
Mm,
or even about emotions or being heavy or light or so I learned very young age to just stuff things down and that certain things were just not acceptable to be talking about. And what do you do with all of that? Well, over time, I'm also a very sensitive, intuitive, empathic sort. So I was not even just taking on my heavy emotions, I was absorbing a lot of the pain of others.
mm,
And so by the time I was in university, ended up in art school. And that was almost like a natural beginning of learning how to communicate my emotions, which are
mm,
energy in motion. And by flowing them out onto a painting or a drawing, could actually see a part of me outside of myself. And it was at first in art school where I was told by a few professors about, Corey, you should really think about art therapy, because I was hungry to understand myself. I was often going through depressions. I had a lot of anxiety, panic attacks, and I didn't know to call it those things. I just walked around. I called it in the morning. I'd wake up with the big fear. I was just scared all the time. And the art relieved a lot of that because I could create new worlds. I could create new stories. So interestingly, as I got married and then we started to move around the world, I did eventually study art therapy. And then in Bangkok, I started to really understand how it was literally moving energy out of our bodies. And the world of energy healing opened up to me there too. So it was just like I learned all these techniques along the way, but essentially I learned that each one of us is really meant to flow through life, not to be afraid or stuck in life. And we're meant to flow as what I call the creative intelligence that we are. And other people might call it source or God. In Middle East is Allah, a higher power that is in us on the micro is also in the world and the macro. And when we can get into a space where we're not, our nervous systems are calmed down, and when we're coherent between our heart and mind, we can tap into wisdom and potentials and not feel like we're doing life alone. And
mm.
that in itself, wow, that just, even when I say that, my shoulders relax and can feel a lot more supported in life. So these were all tools that came to me through a lot of challenging years overseas, which have now translated into the very medicine that was good for me. I ended up getting trained in and helping other people around the world with it.
That's fascinating. It sounds like so much of what you do, I mean, first of all, as you were saying, is based on that personal experience that you have and managing that yourself and finding ways to be more expressive. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a lot of what you deal with is that blockage that people might have either sort of energetically or just, joining up what's going on for them kind of consciously with what's going on with them emotionally. Does that sound right?
That's really it. I mean, we're complex beings. We're body, mind, spirit, and we have all of these pieces, but at the underneath it all is, and when they take us, science takes us down to the smallest quark. We're quarks. We're just
Hmm.
vibrating energy.
Yep.
And but that flow that we're meant to be flowing streams of energy, but we can forget, we don't know that, no one taught us that, so we can overly identify with ourselves as this dense matter. And
Mm,
when we get too caught up in that density, it's slow and it's stagnant, it's hard to make changes. And especially when we don't understand that things that are challenging or things that are really causing us to feel, well, some of the heavy emotions, sadness, fear, anger. I mean, there's variants of this. You can have frustration right up to rage with anger, feeling shame, feeling disgust, those sort of things that we don't really know how to keep in our flow with them, because there weren't things we were taught in school, how to manage those sort of things. We don't know that when you learn how to, I say, upcycle them, just like those beautiful artists who take broken, discarded materials that seem
Mm.
useless or
Mm-hmm.
damaged, they're actually brilliantly, if you know how to work with them, they can become absolute masterpieces, upcycled for something else. In the same way, these heavy trapped emotions, if you pivot, if you really own anger and you learn how to really talk to it, and how do you talk to it? You gotta see it. You flow it out of you as an energy onto a page, a piece of paper, or maybe you're putting it onto a into a clay sculpture. And so it's out of you now. You can actually look at it and talk to it. That's part of you. And I
Mm.
teach people how to dialogue with this intelligence, this creative intelligence that is theirs. Then they can learn to pivot it and find out, wow, when you pivot anger, you get joy.
Mm.
When you pivot sadness, that pivots to deep peace. If we can sit with these things, as Rumi said, he called it the guest house, when we can greet these ones instead of pushing them away or feeling bad that we have them. I felt bad for years that I had fear, but actually, fear was waiting to talk to me, because when you can pivot fear around, then you can find real deep, deep love. But I just didn't know the way to upcycle my emotions.
Mm.
So that is what I love to teach people how to do.
Hmm. It's so interesting. It reminds me of working with some kids that I've worked with who have really deep-seated fears or anxieties.
Mm,
And one of the things that's very helpful to them, and obviously as a child, your knowledge of these things is very small, and
so
they kind of come out of nowhere, and you just don't have the experience. But a lot of times what we'll do is externalize that fear, that worry, maybe give it a silly name. Done things before, like, put mustaches on it or whatever, to kind of like,
mm,
have it be not
fantastic.
quite so threatening. But it sounds
Yeah.
like that's a lot of what you're talking about, is that externalizing, recognizing what it is, but then also, and this is another sort of, I don't want to call it a trick, but I suppose as
Yeah.
part of what you have to do is to be able to take that and also incorporate it into who you are, so that it's not just something that is pushed off to the side.
That's it. And the thing, oh, I love that you're doing that. I mean, and with children, they think in metaphor. I
Yeah.
find that this sort of thing, and it doesn't have to be, I'm using art with crayons, I mean, I know people who do it with movement, with
Mm.
music, with a mustache, make it fun. Like, I do that with my inner critic voice. I
Mm.
call her my inner nag. She's got this really like wrinkled up nose, and like I personified, and children are wonderful at this,
Yeah.
and I think that's really important, because I mean that's the with this book that came out of me, it was basically there I noticed there was this progression. We would seven kind of power tools. The first thing was to own it, to say, okay, I have this fear. It's really, and then to really own it and really look at it. So whether you're going to put it on a page or you're going to move it through your show, what does it feel like? Oh, I feel like this, or how show that fear. Let's bring it out of this shadow. The minute we get it out of that shadow, it starts to not be as threatening, because now it's this thing in the room with us. Okay. And then I can, when I do, I still do this work on myself, and
Mm.
as soon as I've kind of named that thing, already it's lost some of its power over me, and
Mm.
I notice that, wow, I'm actually sitting with this. I'm not, one of my go-tos, oh, I'll go get really busy. Then I can avoid this thing, right? Or I'll
Mhm.
stick my face in the chocolate drawer. If
Mhm.
I'm in the chocolate drawer too much,
That's
I've
how your
got
family
something.
knows there's something's going on. She's in the
Hey,
chocolate drawer.
mom is back in the chocolate. There's chocolate's gone. Mom, you got to do some inner work. But,
uh,
and then the next thing you can do is you ask it. You get to know it, like ask on it. What are you trying to tell me? And what if you were like the upcycling artist? What if you weren't a problem? What if you were some sort of material I can work with? What would be the thing you want to teach me? What is it?
mm,
Then all of a sudden it can start to change.
Hmm.
So that's really the way we can start to work. We can literally dialogue with elements of ourselves when we put them out of ourselves. And I'll even tell people, if you're sitting down doing this, then when you're talking to, maybe get up and talk, put look another perspective, or put it up on the wall and you sit down and just change your perspective of this. Get comfortable in the room with it, and maybe live with this drawing for a little bit. And then when you feel ready, have a conversation with it. And so depending on the age of the child, if
Mm,
it's a child who's maybe a bit older, they can do just free writing about it, like ask a question and just maybe some words will come out, or
mm,
maybe you'll get a sense inside. Everybody has a different way. And then it's becomes an ally. It's not this thing that you're fighting, it
mm,
becomes a piece of
mm.
of intelligence that you're working with.
That's so healthy, I think, for self-esteem, and
Mm.
that you don't feel as though there are these bad or things with negative connotations about yourself, or
Mm.
diagnosable symptoms, even per se, right? That is sort of, how can I work with this? What can I do to get kind of the message out of it? That, look, what is it trying to tell me, as you've been saying? So what does it look like when you're working with somebody? I mean, it sounds like obviously you have to sort of tailor that to how old they are, what's going on for them. Give me an idea of what it looks like when you're working with someone.
Mm. Yeah, the first thing is to make sure that the whoever I'm working with feels really safe to
Mm,
to do this, because this is asking something new. And whenever we step into something new, that in and of itself can be so
absolutely.
even, sometimes before we even go to the thing that is the challenge or the struggle, it's really just good to get comfortable with expressing in new ways. And these are actually, I'll share a few things that are really good for just even myself when I'm feeling like stressed or anxious. I still use them because they're centering activities. So maybe just taking and teaching people, teaching children or even adults how to create not from the head. So the first thing people will say, well, I'm not artist or I'm not creative. Like they get uncomfortable, especially if they feel not they haven't touched a crayon for some people decades, or if a child has low self-esteem and they're insecure, they don't feel confident. So it's teaching how to move from the feeling heart, not the thinking, or feeling mind, not the thinking mind, I say. So I liken crayons. I'll show the crayons,
Mm.
and I always have them ripped, a little bit messy.
Even the
Not,
crayons aren't perfect.
even the crayons aren't perfect. And in fact, because sometimes you want to slide them on the side,
Mm,
and I just say, instead of thinking that we're doing art, just be like a curious explorer and just uncover what lights you up, because we need to know what floats our boat, what gives us joy, and do more of that. And that's actually building good new neural pathways when we start to learn what's good for me, what feels good for me. And so I'll say, look at those as though they're little candies. And
mm,
maybe auntie took you to the ice cream shop, or mom didn't take you telling you get the healthy. No, it's someone took you, like maybe grandma said, go, let's go to the candy store, choose the one you like. And then you grab like that. So it's teaching to trust that intuition. And then we might play doodle tag, where I'll say, okay, now even on the paper, draw the way that feels good. Maybe you're a spiral person, or maybe you like zigzags, or so it's really staying in the power of play.
mm,
And then the body, the nervous system can start to calm down. And then they can measure these things physiologically, right? The serotonin levels start to increase, because the person starts to kind of, the breathing deepens, and then it's just this inner smile, maybe even an outer smile. So I'll get the kids to draw, and then I'll say, and I'll empower them. I'll say, now you decide when you stop playing tag, and then you got to call me on a color, and I'm going to join your line where you left off.
mm,
So right away we're building a bond, but we're doing it through play. and we're doing it through a new language. We don't really need words after a while. The child will then, all they'll say is, grab pink, your turn. But essentially, it's quite a beautiful thing, because to share a drawing together, that's sharing a space. So that's usually how I enter in. Or another, if a child is really not comfortable to share right away, and sometimes I am I'm 6'1", like I can
Oh,
be a presence. And you think about being a little child. So
uh,
sometimes we'll sit crisscross on the floor, and they'll just say, okay, how about we each take a little paper? I said, I'm so big, maybe can you cut me a little paper and cut a circle, and then we'll just do mandala making.
mhm.
Because that's, of course, Jung has taught us that's centering into ourselves, which is so good for anxiety. And I still do mandalas just to bring everything in, bring
Mm,
everything in.
mm.
And then maybe we'll always extend it. So maybe I'll say, okay, maybe can we trade? Can you go into my mandala and I go into yours a bit? Or do you want to make one together? Or always letting them guide me.
Mhm.
And then from there, we can enter in to talk about, I wonder what's going on. What's hot? What's scaring you? I wonder if you could draw that on. What color would that be? What shape would that be?
Mm.
Just letting them lead into that.
Do they end up, or is the I don't know that there's a goal necessarily with some. I mean, obviously you want them to feel better, and I think the just doing what you're doing, as you've talked about, I've noticed myself that focusing on something very detailed like a mandala drawing, and you're both kind of working on it, that it's almost like a distraction technique, because you're so focused on that you're not necessarily thinking about, oh, I'm feeling a little nervous, oh, who is this really tall lady that I'm here with, and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yes.
Do you then sort of move to actually verbally talking about this with them, or do you just kind of stay in that place of play,
Yeah.
etc.?
That's a great question. I asked the same question when I was training to be an art therapist, because I was
Mm,
trying to like imagine with a child. And I remember one answer from the prof. She just said, so few words you need with a child. And I was curious about that. And I was getting excited about when it came time for practicum work, like what does she really mean by that? And that's when I love the power of art therapy, because she's right. And actually, quite often with an adult, that moving of, like I said, energy and motion on a page, and that all those beautiful things that are happening to calm the nervous system, to just bring one into that state. I was so blown away once. I was living in Bangkok, and I remember working with a child who was having nightmares about it. Tiger. A tiger was coming to this child at night. And also, his grandfather had just recently passed.
mm,
And his grandfather had given him a precious stone. In Bangkok, there were a lot of these things happening where there was a lot of awareness about energy and stones, and these, bracelets with the stones. And interestingly, I said, what stone did Papa give you before Papa transition? And he said it was a tiger's eye. I thought, oh, there's something there about this tiger is coming to him in the tiger's eye. And he was so scared. He booked it. I think he was probably around 8 or 9. He was a beautiful boy. And his mom had shared that, because she was coming to a weekly course that I had for adults. So he had seen her art, and he had seen his mom was a corporate banker. She had a lot of stress, and he said, Mom, you seem so much happier since you go to Corey's studio. So she said, maybe Corey will work with children. So I said, oh, I would love to. And I remember he came in and he told me this. That there wasn't much beyond that. He didn't want to speak much, and he kept saying, "You're very tall." And I said, "I know." I said, "Should we just sit on the floor?" So, and we did. We started with some doodle tag, and then he said, my grandpa gave me a tiger's eye stone, and I said, "Oh, show me the color of that stone." That's all it was. Show me the color of that stone.
mm,
Could you show me in a drawing? And he looked, and I said, in fact, I said, these are my magic scissors. You get to, I have this roll of paper. I said, You get to choose how big you want to make this drawing. You can make a little drawing for me, or you can, I said, look at me, I'm big. I can handle a big one. It's up to you. And I always joke with them. And he grabbed this roll of paper, and I mean, it was about the size of me. And he set out and he drew this ginormous tiger. And it was incredible. Like, I knew right away what it was. I mean, and I was quite amazed, and he drew it. And the whole time he's speaking to himself, I'm not afraid of you anymore. You're going to actually be my protector. He turned this beautiful drawing into his spirit guide, like a totem, to protect him at night from being scared. And he used so much energy to color. And then he said, "You have paint?" And I said, "I have paint." So because the crayons weren't enough, And then all of a sudden, could you do this orange? And can you do? So I was his assistant, and we built this thing. And then he wanted to come back and finish the background. And in 2 sessions, well, even his mom said, he said, "I want to keep it at the studio, but Mom, take a photo." And when they got home, he printed it and he put it over his bed until we had finished the tiger. And she said, "Corry, it's incredible. Whatever he needed to do, he did. And he feels really safe and really connected to his grandfather's energy." And I thought, this is the thing. There is an intelligence far bigger than us. I mean, how would I know? I just listen and I attune, and I can sense when a child needs clay. Sometimes I can see them. Or, I see all of us as a work of art, and you can kind of feel, but I always check in. What do you need it? Would you like this or this? And they always know. And I could have never predicted that. And how beautiful that was the medicine he needed. And so I know that we all know. We just need to have the invitation to come at our problem or challenge in another way. And it's not art therapy for everyone. It can be, some people, hypnotherapy is fantastic or whatever. But I do know that if you get out of the linear, logical, beta mind that's hashing on a problem, which tends to expand it and make it bigger, and you can sink into the heart space and just let this one rest, then you can open up to access greater intelligence that can give solutions. And there's infinite potentials there. So it's a marvel to me how this works. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. It makes me think of almost like a meditative practice, that you're letting those thoughts that come in cognitively, just kind of letting those go and allowing other things to come up. But I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier that people who aren't necessarily artists, like, you don't have to be this skilled art person. So that's definitely me. I have there's sort of a running joke I have with some of my friends that, like, you put my drawing next to a kindergartner's drawing and you did kind of a toss up. You don't really know who is her. I do these drawings and I put my age down at the bottom, like, as a joke, because it looks like it was done
awesome.
by a 5-year-old. So, but I'm imagining myself coming into this situation and wondering how you, for older kids, for teens, or even for adults, like, how do you give them permission to just sort of go past that and to get out of their own head, so to speak, to access those things?
Yeah, this would be the biggest hurdle I have with everybody. And in fact, even myself, this is the thing, even though I went to art school, it's funny, I find it easier to open the door to someone who has no art training than someone who's like me, trained. So we get in our head and we try to make something balanced, like we try to make art.
Right.
But the art with art therapy is just, like I said, it's just energy and motion. So before we even begin, I always really lay that foundation. And in fact, I do with everybody before any session, even myself, I'll do it at the end of a day. It's just it's almost like the equivalent of a brain dump that Julia Camera speaks of in The Artist's Way with writing. I'll do it. I'll encourage people to do it, and I'll give a demo where quite similar to how I described that sometimes we do on the side of a crayon with just moving energy out. So your analogy of a preschool drawing is perfect because I usually say that. I'll say, I'll take a crayon and I'll say, this is a magic wand, and I'm shrinking you, especially to adult groups that I work with. I'm giving you full permission for your inner toddler to come out.
How do
And
people
that's
respond to that? How
most people just love it that they
really?
get to play. And then
Mm,
because that I'm saying this isn't art like Picasso. We're
mm,
we're we're putting doodles down, you know?
mhm,
And then I'll demo it, that some of you are going to like squares, and some of you, or some of you are going to put 5 crayons in each hand and go to town. And that's moving it out, whatever your impulse wants you to do. And that is very liberating. For
mm,
example, his mother, who would leave a corporate job, and I loved it. She'd come in with her brief, she'd pull her suit off. It was like a Superman change. She'd
mhm,
throw a t-shirt and yoga pants on,
mhm.
and she'd be flop on the floor and join every. And I even say, wherever you want to create, I really teaching people, but let this one rest. In the Western world, we use it way too much. We don't
Your brain.
create coherence with
Mhm,
the brain.
mhm,
Exactly. Actually, yeah, for your listeners. So I'm pointing to my head. Let the brain rest and get into the center of the feeling side. And that, see, the thing is, we don't trust that feeling mind because it's chaotic, childlike, doesn't tell time. it's, but it's where all creative impulse and intuition are. And it's where the wonder is, it's where
mhm,
the magic is. So we don't trust that. So if you create a safe space and say, listen, we're all going in, and there's no way you can get this wrong because it's just your expression. And interestingly, when you do this enough, a lot of the people who come to me who say, I couldn't even draw a stick man, Corey, I'd be terrified, and then they come in and they go for it. It's phenomenal what comes. Everybody is highly creative. So when there's such safety and no judgment, just pure loving space, as the universe is holding us this way. So to the micro, to the macro, if we can really experience that, it's phenomenal what can come out. And many of my clients or students have later on grown to love it so much that they take art classes, or maybe they take a pottery class, and they've become artists. Even when I was writing my book, I went back to reconnect with some of my former students or workshop attendees and said, listen, your story is coming through my creative intelligence as I'm writing. It wants to be in the book. And could I hear how you are? And it's been 10 years. Like, what's going on? And right away, it was amazing to me, the growth, because I remember them being this tentative, and they would say, oh, well, yeah, Corey, share it. I want people to know this is in them. Like, how do you know what's in you if you've never been invited to play this way? And to upcycle, in the meantime, you're playing, but you're also taking a challenge, which you're usually running away from, or fight or flight, right? Or battling,
mhm,
and you're literally putting it in the art and flipping it around. And so a lot of them said, that XYZ has happened in my life. And a lot of them had gone on really creative paths or changed a direction. And it was phenomenal to see that, wow, when you come to know more of yourself, you can't help but fall in love with yourself more,
mm,
because you come to be more patient too. You don't judge yourself for having these anxious thoughts, or have, it's very human. And it's actually, you have now tools to work with it, so you can really be easy on yourself and become a lot more loving to your
mm,
own self, which
mm.
translates huge in one's life. I know it has for mine.
Yeah, so many people are really interested to learn about, even, and of course, in a very, Western way, the neurology that's behind your anxiety and how that's protective. Ultimately, it comes from this place deep wired in the back of our brain
Mm.
to keep you safe. But it will sometimes fire in places that aren't necessarily appropriate to that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you think of what seems to be kind of the rage in the last couple of years of this idea of that there's another brain that's located in your gut. and that people are listening to that a lot more now versus the the this piece of gray matter we have up here in our
Yeah.
behind our cranium, but this idea that there's a sort of, I mean, the saying has always been there, listen to your gut, but that there's actual intelligence that's sort of located in this magnificent biome that's down there, and all
Mm,
these different kind of flora and etc. So I'm
yes.
curious here if you have a take on that.
Oh, and it's so amazing you bring that up. I was just listening to a podcast talking about that today, and it made
uh,
me think of one of the women in this very course I was telling you about. She gave me a book about this very thing, and she
uh,
taught me a lot of these things because I was constantly inviting everyone to bring coherence between the two, and I think there's so much we need to pay attention about to that very thing. And like you said, we'll say, "Oh, I trusted my gut on that," or
mm,
kids will. I had it for a year. I remember my mom saying, "I think I should test her for an ulcer." I'd always be holding my tummy and say, "I don't feel good about this," and I was so nervous about going into anything new. So I had it on overdrive, obviously. But I think this is really important information to learn about the gut. And I'm also very fascinated about. I think there's this well, we have the energy centers. I also study with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I spent some times in his advanced retreat. So he's making it more accessible. Instead of calling them our chakras, he's calling them our energy centers. So the gut is right next to the heart,
mhm,
and those two, are really powerful. And you're right. I think in the West we don't we put so much attention on, well, it just doesn't sound logical, or
mhm,
"Oh, that's crazy, you're talking woo woo,"
mhm,
and yet we can feel all this stuff going on inside of our center. And when you look at the physiology too, they can measure stuff that's going on inside too. And I'm fascinated by that as well. And things like heart math, which can measure now that the heart's magnetical field, for example, they can measure is 5,000 times stronger than that of the mind's magnetical field.
mm,
That's a lot of power. And
mhm,
so when we're ignoring those parts of us that are, and children, they're very clear when they have all these feelings inside, and they don't edit it or they don't push it down. I think we need to really be paying attention to that and recognize that even when I have someone come in and they have something that hurts in them, the first thing we do is I just get, let's draw a gingerbread man cut out,
mhm,
and we just close my with art therapy. My approach, I take a transpersonal approach. I've mentioned a few times this micro to the macro. The
mhm,
universe, we're universe in a pair of jeans, and there's this universe out there, but we're not nothing separate. So we don't do anything until we close our eyes and we center into our heart. And I take a beat from heart math there, where if we slow our breath down and just inhale for 5 counts and just hold for a moment and then flood our whole system with an elevated emotion. So we talked about some of the heavy ones. Maybe we can flood it with joy or peace, or just love, unconditional love. We are that incredibly creative and powerful that we can fill our cellular, and especially when someone's coming in going, "Oh my, so stressed, oh my, my stomach is in knots." Let's just go straight there, because that's actually our power center. And yet we don't know that. Of course, in the yoga teachers will tell you your solar plexus, that's your sun, that's your power center. So I'll always refer that to clients. Let's go in, and we actually, when we breathe, I do a guided visualization that there is a ball of light there. That's our power center, and let's use that. And that's our intelligence. We can always put a hand on our heart and our belly, and I'll even do it in daily life when I start to feel a little off center, or I think, "Oh, I don't know if I should I go or not." Always close your eyes, just tap the heart, tap the tummy, and just breathe and ask your creative intelligence, which way should I go? And information will come. For me, I can literally hear it like a voice in my ear. Some people will literally see a scene, or they just have a knowing of which way to go. And the shamans taught us that. From the ancients always knew this, that there's often a tapping of the tummy and the heart before making a big decision. That's all the tools we have are right in us, but we just don't learn these things in school.
I know what you're saying, and I feel like for myself and my own experience, and sometimes, I'll tell this to clients a lot of times too, who might be agonizing over a decision, for instance. Um,
Hmm.
do I go this way? Do I go that way? I've made my list. I've made my pros and cons. I've done all this sort of cognitive work, and I'm still not sure. To be able to, as I was saying earlier, just kind of turn that off and then see what comes
Mm.
out. And I know that for myself, and I tell people that all day long, but still I have to remind myself to do it, which is interesting. Like
Oh
the
my gosh,
irony.
me too.
Okay.
No, it's true. Now I'm quicker to do it because it's right there.
uh,
But a way that you reminded me, and another great way with the art is to literally do that, to take those two choices and to imagine or image in, I say, like what, again, a doodle drawing, but just imagine, like be your future self. So we go again, we try to, you can't solve a problem. What does Einstein said? Something like you can't solve a problem from the same
oh,
level of mind, right?
the right from the same mind that created it, or
Mind,
something
right?
along that.
So
Yeah.
when they're stressed, I'm like, your stressed mind is not going to answer. Let's go breathe in. So when from that calm, grounded breath place, and I said, even if you want to draw with your eyes closed and randomly grab colors or squint and just play, just draw the feeling. How would you feel if you took choice A? And there will be a certain kind of drawing will come out there, and then I'll, okay, and that, how do you know when you're done? I said it's like a buffet. You'll just feel full. Then when that one's done, I'll say, okay, like, and I say these things for your listeners, you can do this,
Mhm,
just a scrap paper, and
mhm,
then even if you don't have colors, just take a pen, and how do you feel? You're drawing, you're just thinking about your feeling. You don't worry about what it looks like. It's going to look like a preschool drawing. Then let's try plan B. How does that feel? And then all of a sudden you'll look at them side by side, and some people will still say, no, now I don't know. I like both drawings, but I'll say, okay, we're like the plants. We'll go to the light, we'll go to the sun. The
mhm.
one that's which one is pulling your eyes, like your attention, your focus? And it's always true. There's always one that's, because your intelligence is out there in front of you, so you can just like marry it. So I'll say that, but how often do I do that?
Gotta walk the
However,
walk. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that, why I am a lazy girl. Like
Uh,
I like quick tools. So that's why I, interestingly, after learning art therapy, then I study energy work, which essentially, and I write this in the book too, all that's these little things I'm telling you, you can do in your imaginal world energetically, and it's no difference. The brain doesn't know the difference.
mm,
So I will literally do that. I'm so done so many drawings in my life, so I'll literally like imagine, oh, what would that feel like? And I
mhm,
might not see a drawing, but I'll have a feeling, and then I'll think, okay, plan B. And or I go, like I said, this is the quickest one, is to the heart, and hand on the heart and hand on tummy, and then I'll just breathe in and I'll just go to that experience. And we can, it's like a muscle, we can get really good at this so that we can energetically just know how to choose very well for ourselves,
mm,
for
mm.
sure. Mm.
It's so much of this too, I think, is giving yourself that time, which,
Mm.
again, back to our sort of, we're talking so much about Western ways of looking at things, which I think is, related to your sort of worldly perspective that you have, but also just culturally, everything is go, go, go. And, from
Mm.
2 to 3, I'm doing this, and 3 to 4, blah, 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 pick up the kids, go make dinner.
Yeah.
And just being able to do that feels like a struggle for people, even if it's only 5, 10 minutes. A lot of the meditation apps or relaxation apps now, I think I've noticed, are even more focused on, all right, if you can just do these 1 minute meditations or something, or 2 minute, like, let's
Yeah.
just start like somewhere with something. And again, the irony of having your phone like remind you to do these things. It's
Yes.
just like
I
the
know.
the ultimate pulling your attention away from things. You need that to remind you to pay attention to yourself. But I think that's just culturally where we are, at least in the
Yeah.
United States anyway. But it's so powerful to give yourself that time. And I think also a lot of what you're saying is the freedom and permission to go there.
Yeah, I think it's that. It's like a cycle. Like it starts to feed itself because even that taking a piece of paper, you can do a moving meditation, right? Even walking, just deciding, I'm going to just walk and breathe and just really feel myself walking, even just to the car, or,
Mhm.
or you put these places in, like I've even said that to people, just this breath into your heart. Make it part of like before I turn my car key, I'll do that. I'll just breathe in. I'll just give myself some love and even envision that wherever I go today, let it just be a great, like whoever I get to talk to, or if I'm going to the bank, let that interaction be amazing. Just quickly.
Mhm.
And then the payoff is so good and so quick that it's kind of like it incentivizes you to
Mm,
do it more. And you're right. We do live quick lives, but what happens is time is elastic,
mm,
and you start to realize like, oh wow, I only took a few. It's the intention. It's that mindful, or actually I call it heartful, because
mhm.
there's not a lot of mind there.
All right.
It's getting out of that mind. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's just choosing to disrupt a little bit because it is go, go, go. And then you can come to the end of the day and you're completely depleted. So it's just putting in a few little places. So maybe when you brush your teeth, you're just looking really in your eyes in the mirror and you're giving yourself love. Like it took me decades to really look at myself in the mirror because I was going after I had this to do and this to do. And so I had just transferred a lot of my anxiety into lists from Hades because I was a mom, three little kids. So
Oh,
it's like amped up, right? I
yeah.
didn't have any tools. I didn't even notice that I was doing that. And I couldn't just sit, or I couldn't just look at myself and say, you're doing a great job. I love
Mm,
you,
mm.
and feed yourself little bits, like having those little snacks through the day of, and it doesn't have to be complex and it doesn't even need your phone, but you're right. It is funny.
Yes. Yeah, I love that idea of having these visual reminders when you go throughout the day, whether it's,
Mm,
every time I go out my door, I'm just gonna remind myself that, oh,
nice.
I'm going out my door. I mean, it can be as simple as
Yeah,
that to,
simple as that.
bring yourself back to that idea of paying attention to what's happening instead of being pulled in so many different directions at once.
Mm,
And I think the beauty of it, as you said, the payoff is there, and we like that. We like instant gratification.
we do.
Certainly, behaviorally, that works well. So just reminding yourself on a very small way to start. And as you said, it took you so long that it's okay. You're not going to, turn into a completely mindful, peaceful person overnight. This,
Yeah.
this is it's a continuing
It's a
work.
continuing,
Mhm.
exactly. And yet you can right away, because if you have lived a long time without it, then as soon as it starts, you start to feel more grounded, or just notice that, oh, I'm breathing deep in my belly. I'm not, I all of a sudden it again, it just naturally you want more of that because you feel good. I mean,
Mhm.
we came for the joy, and for to be able to create that. That's why I call myself a creative healer and teach people that that's how powerful we are. We can literally create this for ourselves. But I just didn't know that that was I felt like I was being run by something. I didn't know that I could take hold of a few simple tools and actually create this for myself so that I could feel that I am alongside with this is our nature, actually, to move like this and to not be jacked up on all
Yeah.
sorts of, and amped up all the time, to actually, when you watch an animal move in nature. Yeah, I have moments I'm frustrated as heck. I have 3 teenagers,
Uh,
but like a duck
mhm,
who shakes, and like I've got
mm,
2 ducks out. We have a pond out there. They fight. It's
mhm,
just and then they shake those feathers like completely, and
mhm,
then they're done, and then they're hanging out,
mhm.
taking out stuff. God knows what they're eating in that garden. But it's quite gorgeous to watch nature and think, okay, that's it. Like, I had an emotion. I know how to move it through me. If I have big emotion, I'll grab a piece of paper, or I'll get myself out up in, this is my quiet room. And I'm anything but quiet. I'll just stomp and dance and
Mm,
shout,
mm,
move it right through me, and then whew, I'm through.
mm,
It's when we're hanging on to that for, I went decades hanging on to stuff I
mhm,
was
mm,
mad about. I just didn't know how to move that through me. So that's when you got to look at yourself and think, I'm more valuable than that. I need to have a session with Stephen, or I need to find this resonates with me. I need to find ways, start to get curious and treat your life, instead of being mad at yourself that you haven't figured this out. Just say, that's part of my journey. This
mm,
is my hero's journey. The hero's journey, Joseph Campbell says, you
mm,
take one step towards the gods, 100 will appear. The minute I went to get help the first time, I was terrified because I was
yeah,
so trying to create this illusion that I'm in control, not just for everyone else to see, but for myself. I thought I had to have this shield of I'm in control. And finally, I had to go get help. And I remember this thinking, oh my gosh, how on earth did I attract? She's amazing. She happened to be not an art therapist, but she played guitar. So she
mm,
right away we had this connect. And then a book came in my path that really helped me. And like, all these just right things started to come in the right timing that I could digest them. Wasn't like sudden sprint, but it was a slowly, I was coming up the spiral instead of
mm,
spiraling down.
mm,
And that's the thing that I want everyone to know, that life loves you and wants to support you. And the moment you just allow it and say, I need a miracle now. I'm open. Just open a crack. Something will come to you.
mm.
You can trust that.
There's so much to unpack there. What you just said, I just thought of 1,000 comments, but I'm also trying to be mindful of your time. I, I do want to hear more about the book that you're doing, and also you have is like some e-courses that you have for people.
Yeah. Yes. I book came through me during the first lockdown, when we were all locked down last March. I didn't know I could write a book. I just thought I could paint.
That's when I wrote
But
my book too. Actually, that's funny.
really?
Yeah,
Oh, I have to
yeah,
read your book. Oh, fantastic. Through the lockdown too,
yeah,
Stephen.
yep, yep.
Oh,
Nothing else to do.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
Hmm.
That's fantastic. What is your book called?
It's called Raising Voices. It's about helping kids who have selective mutism, which is an anxiety disorder.
Mm.
So it's kind of half a read aloud book for them and half sort of tips for parents and that kind of thing.
Oh, I have goosebumps. I'm
Yeah.
going to grab your book. Is it on Amazon?
It is. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Oh, I love that. And I'm so grateful you wrote that book. I worked with a few families who are walking through that when I was in my practicum. So they
Well,
would have loved your book.
well, I can imagine they would have loved you as well. I mean, doing all of that work, as you were saying, that doesn't necessarily need to be verbal, but yet can be
Yes.
so expressive. Yeah. So I
Oh,
could.
yeah. I remember that the kids could really express, and
Mm,
feel their power come through. So yeah, it was wonderful.
yeah.
My book is also come through during COVID, and it's called Life in Full Colors: How We Can Unlock Our Childlike Curiosity to
Mm,
Uncover and Activate Our Creative Intelligence. And so it's filled with the things we were talking about, and some it's like yours. It's kind of interactive. very interactive. It's got lots of opportunities to spill your colors through. And it's quite like my husband said, this feels like I'm in a workshop with you. So it really is the process. So, and that's when the e-course came through, because some people say, I love the book, but I'd like to be with you, Corry. So every month I have the e-course go through the main steps, and then you can do it on your own rhythm and pace, because we all have very busy lives. But then we get together at the end of the week. So 4 Zoom calls, and we just do kind of like what we're doing here. Whatever's coming up, we just talk about it. And if there's something to create and upcycle, we do together. So that's all on my website, which is creatinghhealingwithcorry.com. And Corry is like so Canadian. You say sorry all the time. So
Sorry.
Literally, sorry. My mom literally sounded out my name. She heard it phonetically and liked it. So she said, I took sorry.
Sorry, but I took sorry.
Sorry, I took sorry. And I put a C. So it's CORRY, like 2 R's,
sorry. Okay, gotcha. No, that's a good way to remember it, I suppose.
Oh my gosh.
I'll put all that stuff in the show notes too, so people can check that out. Thank you so much. This has just been a pleasure talking with you, and I feel like I maybe want to go draw something or something now, which
excellent.
I haven't done that in a long time. So I just won't let any of my friends see it, so they can't make fun of me.
Exactly. Or you tell them, listen, you can't get it wrong.
Right.
It's just my emotions.
There.
Fantastic. Oh, Stephen, thanks for all the work you're doing in the world. I'm so grateful our paths crossed. It's a gift.
Thank you. Me too. I appreciate it. All right, that was Corry MacDonald. Really appreciate her coming on the show today. Great to talk with her and get her insight. Her website is creativehealingwithcorry, CORRY.com, and her book is called, what is her book called? Life in Full Color. Hope you enjoyed the show today, and don't forget, if you want to support the podcast, leave us a review, get in touch. You can either email me at the email address in the show notes, or get in touch on Instagram at the Anxious Child Podcast. So that's it for today. Take care and be in touch.
This podcast is not intended as medical or psychological treatment. In no way should it replace treatment from a mental health professional.